Good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. First of all, welcome all of you. I know that it's a Wednesday. That is not the usual. We're not following the usual schedule. We always meet at a different time, but today is going to be different. Before we start, let's ask our participants from the region of Asia. We have one participant who is going to do the invocation. So the time is yours. Welcome.
Good morning and good evening from Guam. Today I'll be giving my invocation in my native language and then also translating each line for you all. So this is a blessing that is written for sacred gatherings, and it begins with the words we're taught by our grandmothers to say before walking into the jungle. Gwelatan gwelu, kusinyo malofan gunigi tanotmu. Ancestors, may we pass through here on your land. Gwelatan gwelu naiham onimu ni tautaumu. Itautotanu. Ancestors, give us strength to your people, the people of these lands. Nayam animu ni hinana mami, gihamotna ni kereren mami. Tanafan latla ilinatla zanitautauta. Give us strength on your journey, guide our way ahead, so we may bring forth our life for our people. Met gutham potguna inetnun, give pagu potguna inetnun. Our gathering is strong, our gathering is beautiful. Sainin mami si zuas maasi ginin hagu estisia. Our ancestors and elders, we thank you because all of this is from you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Siobhan.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. Beautiful words and beautiful thoughts, beautiful teachings. And that is what the Global Leadership School of Indigenous Women is about. How we connect with our ancestors, and often we forget those teachings. So Siobhan, from your culture and your teachings from your ancestors, you have helped us connect through your culture and your history and the way that you ask for permission to your elders. While the translation was being made, I imagined the jungle, the big trees, and asking permission to come in. That is where our grandfathers and our grandmothers taught us in our Maya land as well. We have so much in common. We may not have the same language, we may not have the same customs, but we still have a lot in common in the way we think, the way we respect Mother Earth and nature, the air, the sacred water, the fire, and all of those life-giving elements that allow us to be here again, sharing, united, even if virtually, but through our energies. And that is what we seek today. So the Global Leadership School seeks how to unite our communities at the global level. Perhaps not so many of us are connected, perhaps because of the time difference as well, the change in schedule rather, but those who are here have a lot in common and a lot to share. And we have our guest speakers as well coming shortly. They may not have connected just yet. But today we're going to discuss a very important subject. So again, we remind you to write down your comments, your questions, so that when the presentation is given, you know what to ask and what to comment. The focus on the intersectionality of human rights is the subject for today. This subject, this topic is one that you're going to apply, or you're applying already, as you draft your advocacy plan. This is a very important aspect that each one of you is going to have to include in your advocacy plan, and that is the intersectionality. What do we mean by that? I know that it's not new for everyone, but with each presentation, through the experience that each guest brings us, we receive new ideas, new light about this subject, and that will help us with our advocacy plans. Sometimes we say, let's leave aside people with disabilities because that slows us down at the implementation. But this is something that we need to keep in mind: how to have people with disabilities rather to participate in all of our advocacy plans. It's also a process where human rights and the rights of Indigenous peoples intersect. So we hope that today is a day full of learning. But before we go deeper in this subject for today, we are going to also do now an energy giving exercise. In Guatemala, here where I am, it's quite cold. It's raining, there's a light rain, which has an impact in the way on the way we feel. I have heard often from people saying, oh, it's raining, one doesn't feel like doing anything, like getting up. But I believe that the energy that rain brings is also part of what we're going to do. So please, I invite all of you to turn on your cameras, please. All of us were connected. So please, let's turn it on for a moment. Thank you, Siobhan. Siobhan. Thank you to all of you. And I'm going to ask you, I know we're so comfortable sitting down, but today I'm going to ask you to stand up, please. Stand up in place, please. Let's leave the chair for a moment. Thank you. I see how you're all standing up. Thank you so much. Thank you. A teacher taught me once how to balance our energies every day. And today here in Guatemala, the day means a new dawn for us in the lives of women, in the lives of our peoples, in the lives of our organizations and our communities. A new dawn for all of us. So today, please very carefully, let's turn 3 times to our left. So we're going to go against the Western clock. So thinking about our grandparents, we're going to turn towards the left 3 times very carefully. And as you turn, we're going to concentrate carefully so we don't fall. 3 turns to our left, and then we'll go to our right. This is how we balance our energy. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Now we're going to turn 4 times to the right. To the right. Please don't get dizzy. Thank you. Now let's shake our hands. This is a way to shake those negative energies that don't help us move forward. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. And when you feel a little tired, let's do that exercise to balance our energy. So there's 3.
Forma de buscar, de reivindicar también esos
It's a way of also recovering that knowledge that helps us awaken our way of life. It's how to self-help, how to self-protect, also from the influence of all those negative energies, so that we can share everything with balance. I'm going to go ahead and ask if our guests have arrived. Let's see. Okay. So in the meantime, I would like to ask, let's see, how do we begin? What do you know about the subject of intersectionality? Has any of you read anything, heard anything? Let's brainstorm. What do we know about intersectionality? Any of you has
I
any
can,
knowledge about this? Yes, I can
sure.
say.
Okay, I can volunteer.
Por favor.
So I know that a big part of intersectionality is a critical lens of understanding. So it's understanding that in all of the different social classes and categories, no matter like your race, class, or gender, uh, all of those different things are interconnected, and they like inform how you move through society. And so you can't ever just look at one aspect of a person. You have to consider all of the different things that contribute to how they're affected in society. And like intersectionality kind of looks at where all the different parts of like our identities and our experiences intersect, and how that those different places within society, how it like shapes our experiences. And then I think in regards to advocacy work, um, intersectionality kind of helps. Uh, it helps when you're advocating that you like don't leave anybody out, and like ensures that you're creating the most access for the most people, especially the most vulnerable people at like all times. But that's what or at least that's what I understand intersectionality to be.
Gracias, Siobhan. Gracias. ¿Alguien más?
Thanks, Siobhan. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
¿Alguien que quiera compartir sus ideas sobre
Anyone wants to share their ideas on intersectionality? Doris, we can hear you.
Hello, everyone. Intersectionality can also apply to the different instruments that we are using for advocacy work. So, for instance, the UNDRIP is not only cannot only like it can also be related to the different instruments, like for instance, the CERD, the CRC, and all the others. So, when we're doing advocacy work, we can refer to all these instruments to make a more holistic approach to a certain issue. Thank you.
Gracias, Doris. ¿Alguien más?
Thank you, Doris. Anyone else?
Hoy vamos a partir del conocimiento
So
propio.
today we're going to start from what you know.
El pensamiento
We also
constructivista,
apply
y es lo que estamos
a
haciendo.
constructive knowledge. That is something we apply as well. So we're going to start finding out first what you know to then complement that knowledge with the presentations that we're going to have. Anyone else would like to share what they know or their ideas about intersectionality? Don't be shy. If we make mistakes, that's okay. We also have the right to make mistakes. Juliana, go ahead. Yes, thank you so much. For me, intersectionality has to do a lot with the interaction between or among two or more factors, social factors that define a person. So in this case, we can talk about cultural identity. We could talk about gender, where we are located geographically, our age. So things that can affect a person individually. Or rather, it does not affect a person separately from everything else. To the contrary, they all combine and together generate other aspects that could create advantages or disadvantages, equalities and inequalities, depending on how they're all combined. Thank you, Hortensia. Thank you, Juliana. Anyone else?
Bueno.
Okay.
La democracia terminó, entonces
Okay, so democracy, I guess, has ended, I would say. So instead of volunteers, I'm going to ask people specifically. Regina, what do you know about intersectionality, or what ideas come to mind when you think of intersectionality?
Uh, Thank you, Hortensia. I'm sorry, maybe my background is a little bit noisy since I'm still in a meeting, but I'll try to give you my understanding about intersectionality. I think it's the concept that all operation is linked, like the interconnected nature of social categorization, such as race, class, and gender, regarded as creating overlapping and independent system of discrimination or disadvantage. Like intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experience of discriminations and of oppressions. And we must consider that everything and anything that can marginalize people, like gender, race, class, sexual orientation, physical ability, and so on. Thank you.
Gracias, Regina. Ahora también.
Thank you, Regina. I'd like to know what Citlali thinks. Please.
Hola, Citlali.
Citlali, can you hear us?
Compañera. Pues respecto a la pregunta que nos hacen sobre
Hello, sisters, concerning the question that you asked.
sobre la interseccionalidad, pues
Okay,
creo que
about intersectionality, I think that it's a tool that allows us to analyze situations and facing different points of view. So it could also be different situations depending on age, sexual orientation, gender, but mainly it would refer to aspects that are different in society. So I think that this tool allows us to analyze situations such as discrimination, racism, inequalities. So that's what I have heard. But I think we're going to learn more about that.
Gracias, Citlali.
Thank you, Citlali.
Ustedes han dicho, han compartido ya lo que sabemos
You have shared what we know about the topic now, and definitely throughout these virtual sessions that we've had, every expert has mentioned how racism and discrimination have affected the lives of Indigenous peoples and communities, and women especially. And in this dynamic of exclusion, Indigenous peoples have responded to this situation with a great deal of resilience. So when you are writing your advocacy plan, keep in mind these situations. It is true what Citlali said, it's a way of making the invisible visible. What we are demanding of these institutions that we're doing advocacy towards are all of these things. So the advocacy plan is a way of operationalizing all of these, operationalizing a plan that includes all of these intersectionalities, because in our communities, we feel a lot of discrimination. So we need to figure out how to make visible things that have been invisible for many years. We are going to continue working on this topic of inclusion in our plans. Wherever we go to work, we will be taking into consideration, for example, the youth and children, because many times we leave children out of our plans because perhaps we think it's not yet their time. But how can we ensure the sustainability of our processes? It is through the participation that is intergenerational. And so how can we take intersectionality into practice through our advocacy plans? As you have said, we want to make all kinds of diversity visible. And in the last few years, especially, at least in Latin America, we have been emphasizing these intergenerational processes because that's where we truly have an exchange of experiences. And so let's be an example in this practice and be an example in inclusion of all kinds. So let's take advantage of our time this morning. And what's the date today? Does anybody know what the date is today? We are very passive this morning. Today is March 22nd of 2023, and today it's the Day of Water. Exactly. It's World Water Day. Thank you, Bridani. So at the international level, there's a lot of different days that commemorate different things. And of course, water is sacred to us. And we have been taught in many ways to take care of the water. But today, on March 22nd, we have a commitment, don't we? Each region needs to send our declaration in today, our statement, our declaration. And I know that each region has made different levels of progress on this document. And I think that our guests today, who are still not here yet, but we're going to take advantage of the time that we have, they're going to help us look at this. If we haven't finished our our regional declarations, we do have a little bit of time left today to do that. And the representative from each region needs to be able to have the statement of their region so that they can participate in the International FEME Committee, the Global Committee. So let's see, how can we take advantage of this time? Because the second part of our meeting today also has a speaker. But let's go ahead and work at the regional level at this point to be able to make some progress from each region. Can we do that? So, okay, let's go ahead and divide into groups. And then at the next hour, we will come to listen to our speaker. But let's take advantage of this time to work together in regional groups, please. And we'll see you at 9, which means in 25 minutes, 9 o'clock in Guatemala time, but in 25 minutes. So I can now send people to groups? Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. I think we are just left by ourselves to work on this.
Have you guys finished your regional statements?
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing much to contribute. So I just, I think I've just I'm the first one to put, I guess. So I didn't have much, or maybe I'm not able to articulate, I guess. That's what I think.
Right.
But I really appreciate,
Yeah.
Doris, the way you wrote. I read it.
Yeah, thank you.
It was really nice reading
I tried
yours.
I tried already consolidating our
Yeah.
statements, but then we only have the 3, so maybe Shabon and the
Yes.
others can
So
add.
so I've worked on my statement, but I don't have access to like the doc, and it was shared with me, but I don't know who has like the permission. So I tried to open the document to add mine, but I don't know how to access, or like it wasn't opening on my laptop. It said I have to request access, but then I don't know if I've been granted access yet. Yeah.
I think
Maybe
Regina
because
has.
it's Pam who met the link. Maybe she will grant vision for all
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah.
Maybe Doris, maybe we can just create a new job for us. You're like because
Okay.
you, me, and Anima already here, so we can just transfer our statement to the new Google Doc. So
Okay,
siya
I'll make
planning
one now.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mm,
Mm.
I'll just
Okay,
copy it.
okay.
and give it.
I just want to clarify that. So today is the last. So whatever we have put on the documents, that's going to be the last one. I mean, the other sisters are not. They would not be allowed. I mean, the deadline is over. Is that what I understand?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think the
I think
hard that
so. We
yeah.
think so. We will ask Joy after this. But could you please
Mhm.
just write down your email address in a
Mhm.
chat?
Yes. Let me
So
put it in the chat.
all of us, I mean, so Doris can send the docs on our email. The
Or
link,
what
I mean.
Yes.
maybe what I will do would be to what's this to make it open for all so that we can just
Okay.
use it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That will be perfect.
But I think we also have to work to make this statement look like one statement.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? I think someone should take the initiative for that.
Um
To club all these four statement as one.
yes. I actually made one already, but it's still too long. So maybe what we can do is to I'll just share this first.
Hmm.
But maybe the female legal team will finalize it for us. Maybe.
Yeah, because I think we still have time for them to review our individual statements, and then they're gonna help craft it into a like a global statement. I think I remember reading that.
Yeah, because the 22nd is the deadline for us to send to the legal team, not to the
Hmm.
permanent. So if Doris already combined all the three statements together, but it's still so long, I think it's fine. We just send it to them.
Yeah, we just need for the one for Shabon so that
Hmm.
we could combine it. We can integrate it to this one
Hmm.
I'm making, but I'm not yet done. Wait, I'll just get the link.
Okay.
This is the one I'm trying to make, the second link.
Hmm.
But then
Okay.
because for I'm sorry, but the one for Anima and Regina, um I think we are lacking data. So maybe if you
Hmm.
can send more data about what's happening in Indonesia and in sorry
That is the
for
problem.
yeah.
No, from my end, honestly, Doris, that is the problem. Like we do not have much data. So what we kind of believe is more with the uh, word of the mouth, okay, that we
Mm-hmm.
hear from the community because nothing is documented. But even if we talk about, for example, even if I'm talking about sexual harassment or rape, then we
Yeah.
do not have too many cases registered or in FIR or something like that, but it's just like that local news that you get to hear every day. So will that be counted as
Yeah.
data or something like that?
I think so because for instance, if you always do field work, like for instance
Hmm.
me, we have this daily regular meeting with the different communities that we handle, and then they give reports of the different issues that are taking place in their community, and then they give numbers, they give data for it. So what I did for the Philippines, those are actual data that were gathered from them directly. And then the others, like for instance, Indonesia, I got some data, but those are secondhand data. I got it from the internet. So we can do that. And if it's something like, for instance, it's something that concerns indigenous peoples and we know something about it, we can use that data and put it as a link. And for the first-hand data that we have, like for instance, for me in the document, I have data for the Philippines. I put it as a footnote so that we have, because what's important when we're making a statement is that we have data to back it up. But we don't have to, because I consulted with Ellen, if you know her, from AIWN. What we can do is that because it's becoming a long document. So what we can do is we put it on footnote, like what I did here in the second link. I'm trying to put all the data in footnotes so that we come up with only a 3-minute statement.
Okay, so let's look as we wait for Elma to send me to send her document or her statement. Can you, Sabato and Irene, can you please add the names of your organization at the top, where I already put the introduction there on behalf of Africa and the US representing several organizations that include, so please include the name of your organization at the top.
Okay.
So, Sabato,
Yes.
you see where your recommendation is on, you call upon the government of Kenya. Remember that we're trying to make this statement general to the region. Okay. So we're not being specific to country. Like the only time we can be specific is when we're giving examples, right? So for instance, where you're writing about food insecurity and water scarcity is an issue that indigenous women across the continent face, right?
Yes.
So you see where you write their livestock have died due to lack of green pasture and water, leaving them poor, since most of them depend on it for their livelihoods. You can say, for example, in Kenya, most of the livestock has died. So it's just an example.
Yes.
Then for the recommendation, who else other than the government can you call upon to improve health? So now, did you read the previous statement that I sent? The one that was developed last year?
No, I didn't receive.
No, all of you received it because I shared it on Google, on the Google Drive.
I didn't see.
Okay, so I'll read for you
I'll read for you one recommendation that includes countries.
Yes.
So the recommendation is we recommend the following for member states and other UN agencies to develop specific capacity building programs for Indigenous women and girls to empower them with knowledge and skill that will enable them to pursue the economic, social, cultural development. So from that statement, Sabato, how can you change your statement to be more general?
Can I say call upon the member states?
Edit that.
Call upon the member states to improve health.
So, okay.
care.
So there's the member states.
Mhm.
Which UN body deals with health?
WHO.
Okay. So you can call on member state and you can make a very specific call on WHO.
Mhm.
Irene, add your organization at the top where the introduction is.
After the thank you, Chair. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where it's written representing
Of
several
African
organizations.
Indigenous women.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you put a comma and then you write your.
God, they have edited.
I didn't write your organization in all in like the capitalize the first, like the Alliance Indigenous Tribal Peoples. Yeah, please. And then as you're typing, can you also type Hermas?
Yeah.
Hi, Winnie. Have you seen mine?
Yeah, I've just seen it.
Is that okay, Winnie?
Yeah. Please write Hermas as well, since you're there already. Okay. So I think I need to explain something. Remember, okay, when we were having the conversation about statements, how long were we told a statement usually is?
We were told like 3 minutes.
3 minutes. 3 minutes, okay.
Mm.
So and sometimes it can be reduced to how long?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So in those, so you can imagine how much literature can you read in 2 minutes or in 3 minutes? How long were you told the statement should be?
1 page.
1 page. So when you're thinking about a statement and it's only 1 page, do you have time to explain things on that statement?
No.
No.
No. Okay. So for instance, if we'll just start from the first one, yeah. So food security and water scarcity, and okay, Indigenous women have a role of ensuring provision of food and water for the families. Prolonged drought experience in the community has led to food insecurity and water scarcity, burdening women and girls, forcing them to walk for long distances in search for water for domestic use. For example, in Kenya, livestock has died due to lack of pasture and water, leaving them poor since most of them depend on it for their livelihood. If you were to shorten that statement to 2 sentences, what would you write? 2 or 3 sentences at most.
Let me try. Okay. Food insecurity and water scarcity by explaining I could say Indigenous women lack in adequate water and experience food insecurity due to prolonged drought, forcing them to walk for long distances in search of water for domestic use.
Okay, so can you do that?
Okay.
So that you have enough time to not only highlight the issue, but also have enough time to also put in your recommendation. Because remember, it's not just you who's giving who's coming up with an issue, other people are, right?
Yes.
So you'll remove the food insecurity and water scarcity. You'll get rid of that part. But it's just that Indigenous women.
Okay.
So as you work on that, then you'll also come down to where the health place is. And also shorten it. And then
and if I start with due to prolonged drought, Indigenous women experience food insecurity.
It's up to you
and
how you
water
decide.
scarcity. Okay.
Yeah. So you write it how you feel, how you see it makes grammatical. I'll come later on. After you're done, I'll come and edit it also.
Okay.
But I want I want us to know how to edit our own statements, so that if you're invited for an event and you're told to write a 1 minute or a 2 minute statement, you don't go start telling stories and then you get cut off, because remember we were told that the mics are usually shut off. So you have to practice the art of being very concise and precise and straight to the point on the statements that you're writing, right?
Okay.
So as you do that, let's move to the other one. So the next one is African Indigenous people, who constitute a significant 14% proportion of the continent's population, are facing multiple challenges as a result of climate change. These challenges are further compounded by poverty, social inequality, limited access to resources and information. So Irene, in this statement, you haven't told us anything specific. It's a very general statement.
Yeah.
Everyone knows there's an issue with climate change. Everyone knows. You know, the issues that come with it, the poverty, the social inequality, the lack of access.
Yeah.
How can you humanize that statement? Contextualize it. Put it in context. How do you think you can express it better to make it look like it's because remember, when you're doing a statement, it's supposed to be an urgent. It's supposed to be an urgent. It's supposed to be an urgent matter. Right? So now, for instance, if we go back to Sabato's statement, she says, she gives that example, you know, there's food and insecurity. Okay, we all know there's food and insecurity, but what is it causing for the women? What is it causing? What are the results of the water scarcity and the food insecurity? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you put that in context, what does it mean? What does climate change mean for Indigenous women in Africa?
It is affecting them in so many ways, but maybe I should be very specific.
Be specific.
And
so
I
that
can
even
also
on,
maybe delete this, the
you don't
percentage.
you don't need to put that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you come to your recommendation, when you're saying building stronger partnerships between stakeholder alliances, strengthening legal frameworks and policies targeting Indigenous communities, who are these stakeholders that you're talking about?
The government.
Yeah, you have to be very specific on who you're talking about. If you're talking about the government, say between states. If you're talking about the UN, you're saying UN bodies. You know, if you're talking about other the private sector. So when you're talking about the stakeholders, who are the stakeholders that you're talking about, so that it's very specific to those stakeholders, because stakeholders could be anyone. Indigenous peoples are stakeholders on their own. So who are these stakeholders that you're directly addressing your statement to? When you're talking about legal frameworks, which frameworks do you want strengthened? Because so far, how many legal frameworks have you heard about since we started the school? How many? Exactly that's exactly my point. There are so many. You can't keep count because there's so many. Right? So when you say legal frameworks, the first question will be like, which one? Because there's hundreds of legal frameworks that we have. So which one are you referring to that you need strengthened?
Yeah.
If it's strength, what do you mean by strengthening? So do you mean implementation
Mm.
of certain frameworks, because I
Mhm.
mean the frameworks are already in existence. So
Yeah.
would you want implementation of certain frameworks? And if it's implementation of a framework, which framework do you want
Yeah.
implemented? Because from our discussions we've had about how all these conventions are there, the declarations are there, but when it comes to implementation has always been the challenge for states.
Yeah.
So if it's implementation of a framework, which framework do you want implemented? Because when you say, yes, you can say frameworks and policies targeting Indigenous communities, all of them can be applied to Indigenous communities. They don't have to be the ones that are only specific to Indigenous peoples. But I mean, the rights of the child.
Yeah.
Indigenous children are children. So just because it doesn't say the rights of the Indigenous child doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it doesn't apply to them. It does. What we have as Indigenous people is that we have additional frameworks that are specific to Indigenous peoples, but it doesn't mean that these other frameworks or policies or conventions or declarations that exist do not apply to Indigenous peoples.
To the Indigenous world, yeah.
We still can use them. That's why we're learning about the SAD. We're learning about the CRC. We're learning about all these other frameworks that are not. They're not called Indigenous peoples or framework or whatever, but they still apply to Indigenous peoples because we're still human. All these conventions still apply to us, but we have additional. So when you talk about the UN DRIP, it's because it's specific to Indigenous people, right?
Yeah.
So again, be very specific on what framework you want to implement or strengthen, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will work on it
Yeah.
and be specific. Yeah.
So work on it just now as we continue to speak, and then Hermo, let me just move your. Okay, so Herma.
Yes.
I'll just read out so that also the others can hear what you said. So land is the capacity to own land right is the capacity to own a piece of land within the community by documentation. Pastoral communities practice polygamous marriages. It is stated that a woman, whichever number in marriage, has no right to own a piece of land in the community. This is a lifestyle that has been a norm. Women have been left out of decision-making on important matters like land ownership. The traditional elders have set policies that a woman has no right to own land, that they are servants of the family. The women under such conditions have no right to talk before men in social gatherings. It has prevented women from accessing rights on land. Women in such situations should be encouraged to form women groups. This could be an avenue that would enable them to speak on their capacity, build the women over their rights to own land and other property in the community. Last but not least, the administration, for example, the area chief and the assistant chief, should stand for the rights of women as it is stipulated in the Kenyan constitution. Now, Herma, from the discussion we've had from Irene's statement and from Sabato's statement, do you already see where you need to edit on your statement?
Yes.
And then secondly, which one is your recommendation?
Recommendation starts from the women in such situations with the encouraged to form women groups.
Okay. So remember, these recommendations that you're giving them to the UN. Like you're giving them at the UN. You're giving it at the international level. Okay.
Yes.
You're giving recommendations to states, you're giving recommendation to UN bodies. So information, because the government is never going to come and tell you, okay, we've come to form groups for you. It has to be your own initiative. Neither is the UN going to come and tell you, we're coming to form women groups. That is an initiative that women themselves will take. So this is a recommendation that you'd give women who come to you to a gathering that you've planned. What you can do in terms of recommendation is you can recommend for capacity building exercises. You can call upon the state and UN bodies to increase or develop capacity building programs for Indigenous women to learn about their rights in their land rights. See which you can even be more specific and say and check which UN body will work or rather works or has reference to land, and you can mention it there.
Yes.
Yeah. So that again, we're trying to make this statement as regional and as high level as possible.
Administration cannot be
But you see,
that
when you say
recommendation.
the chief, you know, when you talk about the area chief, you realize that administrations in countries are different. So in Kenya, they might be a chief, but in Sudan, we don't have a chief. In Cameroon, there is no chief. Or rather, the chief, the role the chief plays in those other countries and is not the same role the chief plays here in Kenya. Okay. So that's why we always, when we're doing the statements, we always say we recommend to the states, because all the states governments have a structure. So that it's the government that's taking the initiative, because it's now, if the government does not take initiative, even that chief will not be able to take the initiative because the government has not directed them to do so. Are we together?
Yeah.
Because now, for instance, when the permanent forum is doing its recommendations, they will not recommend to the chief of, let's say, Kibera sublocation. They're going to say the chief of Kibera should do this. No, they'll say the states to take initiative to do something. So now, when the state take that recommendation, it's them now who transfer that information down to the area chief. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you could edit your statement, especially where the problem statement is to be 3 sentences.
Yes.
Your problem statement, edit it to be 3 sentences. So now, for instance, you really don't need to say land rights is the capacity to own a piece of land within the community by documentation. You don't need that statement.
Okay.
So edit your paragraph to be 3 sentences that highlight the critical issues that you want to highlight in relation to women and land ownership.
Okay.
Yeah. And
In my state, we are at the verge of kind of becoming minority. I mean, we are already minority in our own state, but in probably in coming years, maybe in the next 20, 30 years, we become more, uh, how do we call it? What comes after minority? So we may become, that population,
Okay.
because we are losing a lot of things, our
Majority?
language, yeah, population. Sorry, Regina, you asked something?
No, I didn't.
No, me,
Okay.
you said what comes after, what comes after minority? Majority?
No,
Mm,
the
Siobhan,
minus,
what's the
maybe the
term?
minus,
Okay. No, that will not happen to you.
maybe the minus or the extinction of the,
No.
you know, that is what is happening here, like the political situation uh, is quite interesting this time. We had a very interesting political situation this year. So it was quite interesting to see, because we have a regional political party whom we thought actually will come into power, because the person who was heading the regional party had a lot of love and support from his people. However, because we are less in number, so definitely we could not win the thing. So a lot of things are happening, because because of other community being the majority, we cannot fight for our own language, we cannot fight for our own culture. So there's a lot of things happening, I think. Even if you are the indigenous in your state, but if you are not good in numbers, in quantity, then it makes a lot of difference.
Yes.
So otherwise, there is no point. Even if you are the indigenous of your community or in your state, it doesn't make any difference, because you are less in numbers. And on top of that, the people who hold authority, they are also not from your community, then it makes a lot of difference.
Yeah. Maybe that can be something that we can add to the statement. Something on that.
But how do we get the data on that? If we really
Uh,
need data, then
Yeah.
I remember like a few years ago there were our training with September is called community based monitoring information system. Maybe you could
Yes.
try to put that as like the community monitoring information system. So you,
Yeah.
even if you have no source like a formal like a link and stuff, you still can put like it's because it's from that community monitoring system.
Mm.
So I think it could be useful.
Yeah, you can actually maybe I can send you links to the what Regina is saying, and then you can do it in your community. I mean, you can start something, organize like a group of people in your organization to start the community-based monitoring information, community-based, what's that, Regina?
Monitoring information system.
Yeah,
Community based monitoring information system.
like you can start collating the information so that it can be used.
is that some kind of software or
No, it's a kind of tool that you can
okay,
use.
using
Um,
like some kind of questionnaire or something like that?
yeah. Maybe you can send me your email via WhatsApp, and then
Yeah,
I will send you the links.
yeah, sure. That will
And are
help.
you
And
are you already connected to Tabtaba?
no, because how I know that Dubai is, I asked you regarding the IFNAI group. So
Yeah, I'm
our
not familiar.
organization, yeah, so there is this group of this indigenous Women's Forum of Northeast India. So our organization is part of that, forum. So we have, I think, the last general meeting, Teptaba funded for that particular meeting, wherein there was I forgot her name, but she was from Teptaba, so she spoke on Sido,
Maybe Ellen.
I can't recall her name. Maybe Ellen. Oh, now I think we're getting
There
back
we're
to the room.
going. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So we'll talk. Yes, I'll talk
Yes.
to you.
Bueno, eh, después de estas conversaciones regionales, creo que ha sido, disculpe, ha sido oportuno este espacio y tal como lo compartí hace un momentito, el internet que utilizamos, aun cuando queramos garantizar nuestra conexión, en cualquier momento se cae, nadie está libre de esto. Pero
could fail. No one is free from this. But the space that we had a moment ago gave us the opportunity to talk about where we are and the process of drafting our statements. When it's the first time that we do this exercise, of course, at the beginning, we're going to feel lost, not knowing exactly how to begin, where to begin. But that's part of the learning process. And every year, as we practice, our experience becomes stronger. That's what we were talking about at the beginning of the process. And one of our goals is that at the end, you also become that communication channel with your communities, your peoples, the permanent forum on Indigenous peoples' issues. So that is why this exercise makes us sometimes feel lost, confused at the beginning. This is normal based on the knowledge that we have, handling all of these tools and these mechanisms that we have. So we hope that you can also contribute to your region. And at the end of the day, we hope to have the 3 statements from the regions that we're representing. We have just a few more minutes to conclude. We thank you for your patience and your contributions. I don't know if there's any comment, any questions. We have a few minutes before we give the floor to our dear Joy. Any comments? Any questions about our statements? Okay. I thank you for your participation during this past hour. Thank you for the exercise. And we're now awaiting excitedly our next speaker, and we're going to give the floor to Joy because she is going to guide us for the next presentation and introduce our next guest. If you have any questions or any comments, please just ask through the chat or to your advisor. Thank you so much. I give the word now. I give the floor to Joy. Joy is not here today, Hortensia. She is not here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, yeah. Thank you so much for that
Oh, yes,
session.
Joy
And
is here.
no, this is Winnie.
Oh, it's Winnie. Sorry, Winnie, I'll move to the Spanish channel.
Winnie.
Hello, can you hear
Bueno,
me?
gracias, Winnie. Le traslado la palabra.
Yes, go ahead, Winnie.
All right,
Yes,
thank you so much.
yes.
All right, perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And welcome again to our the next session. Thank you, Hortensia, for taking us through that first session. I hope that we were all able to make strides towards concluding our regional statements. And we look forward to seeing all your regional statements so that we can have them combined into our global statement that we hope will be able to be presented during the permanent forum. So our next guest is here with us already, and she has been with us for a very long time and is always very willing to come to speak to the participants of the school. And so I want to welcome Jandy Craig, who's here with us. And just before she can begin, I'm going to read out her bio so that we can know a little bit more about her. So Jandy Craig is a member of the White Mountain Apache tribe and was born and raised on the Fort Apache Reservation in Arizona. She's a 2017 Indigenous Fellow at the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights in Geneva. 2018 Global Indigenous Women's Leadership Scholar, and currently works building restorative health, mental health, and wellness programs in her reservation. Jandy enjoys life in a traditional ceremony with her children and is honored to carry the stone as a godmother for her goddaughters through Apache tradition. She continues to be a strong Indigenous women's rights advocate and a strong ally of our global school. So welcome, Jandy. Thank you so much for being here with us. And please feel free to direct the session as you please, and let us know if you need any assistance from any of us. Thank you so much.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all my sisters in FEME. I'm very happy to return to this wonderful school for Indigenous women. I think that the learning opportunity here through FEME is tremendous. And I'm always grateful for being able to be a scholar myself, attending FEME about 5 years ago. Time flies. It feels like it was just yesterday. But I'm very happy to share this morning and talk about MRIT, or the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So first, I'd like to do a short introduction in my Apache language. So Dagot she Jandy Craig on she Zetlagaisi Anandag and Schleet, Dishcheat and Schleet, Nakaya Bunch. So that means, hello, my name is Jandy Craig. I'm from the White Mountain Apache tribe. I am from the Dishcheatin clan, or the Red Horizontal People clan, born for the Mexican. And that's because my mother is Apache and my father is from Mexico. So if you'd like to go ahead and start my presentation, we can begin. I'd like to show the presentation. I'm not able to see it yet. I don't know if, there we go. Okay. So the overview for today, we are going to discuss the purpose of the mandate for the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous People, or MRIP. We are going to discuss the mandate, the experts, the annual thematic reports and studies, country engagements, activities, and how to deliver your statement or intervention at MRIP. Next slide. So to begin with, a little bit more about me. Like I said, I am White Mountain Apache. I am Chicana. That means that I was born and raised in the United States, although my father is from Mexico. I also have 3 beautiful children, very brilliant, 2 daughters and 1 son. I am also a godmother to 5 spiritual daughters. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see me in ceremony with one of my goddaughters during her journey into womanhood. I live and was born and raised on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation, which is located in the Southwest United States. And it's about 4 hours away from the borderline of Mexico. And as she mentioned earlier, I did complete my Indigenous fellowship at the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights. So there you can see on the bottom, we were delivering our intervention at MRIP together as fellows. And then I'm also a community organizer. So I just wanted to share, there's also a picture in the bottom right-hand corner of myself with my daughter, who I took with me to MRIP when she was 4 months old. And so it's very important for me that my children learn and know about human rights for us as Indigenous people, and especially as Indigenous women. Okay, next slide. The expert mechanism provides the Human Rights Council with expertise and advice on the rights of Indigenous people. It assists member states in achieving the goals of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The expert mechanism conducts studies to advance the promotion and protection of Indigenous peoples' rights by clarifying the implications of key principles such as self-determination and free, prior, and informed consent, examining good practices and challenges in a broad array of areas pertaining to Indigenous peoples' rights, and suggesting measures that states and others can adopt at the level of laws, policies, and programs. Okay, next slide. So a little bit more about MRIP. So MRIP was established by the Human Rights Council, the UN's main human rights body, in 2007 under Resolution 636 as a subsidiary body of the Council. Its mandate was then amended in September 2016 by Human Rights Council Resolution 3325. The expert mechanism is composed of 7 independent experts on the rights of Indigenous peoples. The experts were appointed by the Human Rights Council and are selected on the basis of competence and experience in the rights of Indigenous peoples, due consideration for experts of Indigenous origin, and gender balance. The expert mechanism is composed of 7 independent experts on the rights of Indigenous peoples. So as I mentioned there, sorry, I lost track of my notes here, excuse me. So what MRIP does is they call for inputs on their study, such as treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements between Indigenous peoples and states, including peace accords and reconciliation initiatives, and their constitutional recognition. There's also the report on the militarization of Indigenous land, the human rights focused, and some of the latest thematics reports include rights of the Indigenous child under UN DRIP and efforts to implement the UN DRIP for Indigenous peoples and the right to self-determination. Okay, next slide. So the studies and advice of the expert mechanism want to provide a better understanding of the provisions of the UN DRIP and to purpose concrete actions that states, Indigenous peoples, civil society, international organizations, national human rights institutions, and others can take in order to further its implementation. The expert mechanism studies and advice place special emphasis on the participation of Indigenous peoples themselves in decisions that affect them. So it's the same as saying, here is the table where decisions are being made, and we deserve to have a right to sit at that table. Reviewing and updating the mandate. So in September 2016, the Human Rights Council adopted Resolution 3325, which amended the mandate of the expert mechanism. MRIP's new mandate is to provide the Human Rights Council with expertise and advice on the rights of Indigenous peoples as set out in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and assist member states upon request in achieving the ends of the declaration through the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of the rights of Indigenous peoples. So specific new elements of the mandate include, upon request, assisting member states and/or Indigenous peoples in identifying the need for and providing technical advice regarding the development of domestic legislation and policies relating to the rights of Indigenous peoples, providing member states upon their request with assistance and advice for the implementation of recommendations made at the Universal Periodic Review and by treaty bodies, special procedures, or other relevant mechanisms. Upon the request of member states, Indigenous peoples, and/or the private sector, engaging and assisting them by facilitating dialogue in order to achieve the ends of the declaration. Also, identifying, disseminating, and promoting good practices and lessons learned in the efforts to achieve the ends of the declaration through reports to the Human Rights Council. So one of the things that I wanted to mention also, earlier I did say that they provide reports when there's a universal periodic review. So the Universal Periodic Review, or UPR, happens every 4 years for every member state. So that's an opportunity for Indigenous peoples, again, to come to the UN and provide shadow reports or, more information about the status of Indigenous peoples in their countries, and their countries can be held accountable through the mechanisms of the United Nations. So I just kind of wanted to mention that in addition to this is what MRIP provides. Okay, next slide. So the expert mechanism, like I said earlier, consists of 7 independent experts selected in accordance with the procedure established by the Human Rights Council in resolutions 5.1 and 3325. This is an expert partnership program, and it is open for academics or academic institutions interested in joining the MRIP's academic partnership. So currently, this is not a current picture of the experts. This is actually an old picture because I don't have a current picture, but the current members are listed there on the screen for 2022 through 2023. And you can see that there is gender equity, there's representation from both genders. There is also representation from each of the regions of the world. So you can see there's Bangladesh, Canada, Uganda, Norway, Russian Federation, Nicaragua, and New Zealand. And it's really beautiful how small our world is, that as you become more involved in the UN mechanisms, you begin to recognize some of our brothers and sisters who are also doing the work. So for example, my sister from Nicaragua, Anexa Brenda Lee Alfred Cunningham, was the senior fellow at the UN when I was doing my Indigenous fellowship. And her story is tremendous. She came to the UN last year to provide her expertise to MRIP, and unfortunately was not able to return to her home state of Nicaragua. This is the reality of speaking out and trying to hold our countries accountable for some of the human rights violations against our Indigenous people. So this morning, I just want to send extra love and good energy to my sister Anexa as she continues doing her work from Geneva. As I said, she was not allowed to return back to her home country. So next slide, please. So here we're going to talk a little bit more about the thematic reports and studies. The expert mechanism submits annual thematic studies to the Human Rights Council. Thematic studies document findings on particular topics and provide guidance and recommendation for UN member states, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders. The expert mechanism also produces a report each year on its annual session and issues official reports and documents relating to the UN DRIP. So some of the studies that the MRIP has provided includes the study on the rights of the Indigenous child, the report on the right to self-determination, right to land study, repatriation of ceremonial objects, human remains and intangible cultural heritage report, Indigenous people's rights in the context of borders, migration, and displacement, and free, prior, and informed consent, a human rights-based approach. Okay, next slide, please. Another thing that MRIP provides is country engagement. So they will actually come out and visit in our countries. You can make a request for country engagement So during the MRIP 10th session in Geneva in 2017, the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous peoples adopted its methods of work on country engagement. The expert mechanism should, upon request, assist member states and/or Indigenous peoples in identifying the need for and providing a technical advice regarding the development of domestic legislation and policies relating to the rights of Indigenous peoples as relevant, which may include establishing contacts with other United Nations agencies, funds, and programs. They also provide member states, upon request, with assistance and advice for the implementation of recommendations made at the Universal Periodic Review, or UPR, and by treaty bodies, special procedures, or other relevant mechanisms. Also, upon request of member states, Indigenous peoples and/or the private sector engage and assist them by facilitating dialogue when agreeable to all parties in order to achieve the ends of the declaration. Core principles of country engagement. In the country engagement, the expert mechanism will uphold the highest standards of efficiency, competence, and integrity, meaning in particular, though not exclusively, the observance of probity, impartiality, equity, honesty, and good faith. The expert mechanism will neither seek nor accept individuals or instruction from individuals, governmental or non-governmental organization, or a pressure group whatsoever. So like I said, you can actually make a request for country engagement on the website for MRIP. Okay, next slide. So one of the ways that you can also request MRIP country engagement is to send an email. And right there is the email address. Please make a note of it. It's expertmechanism@ohchr.org. And there is a list of information that you must provide in that email to request the country engagement. So it should have first the requesting institution or organization name, and then the name of the contact person or persons. Next is the description of the situation. Next is steps that have been taken to address the issue, including any domestic remedies. Next, expected action by and technical advice to be supplied by the expert mechanism. Next, whether state authorities or other stakeholders have been consulted about or informed of the request submitted to the expert mechanism. Next is the proposed time frame, and finally, any other relevant information. So requests from states should be received through the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, or OHCHR, which provides secretariat support to MRIP via diplomatic channels. Those requests, as I said, need to be submitted from Indigenous peoples to the Secretariat via email. So the expert mechanism will acknowledge receipt of all requests and may accept or decline requests as necessary or desired, taking into account existing capacity and resources, as well as geographical balance. The expert mechanism will also give due attention to issues of current interest, bearing in mind the overall implementation of its mandate, including other elements such as reports and studies, in order to prioritize requests. Requests cannot be accepted immediately. They may be kept in a waiting list and addressed at a later time. The members of the expert mechanism will decide internally which specific members will be assigned to engage with each request, including potential country visits. The decision will be made in accordance with the expertise and portfolio of each expert. Regional expertise and knowledge of local languages should also be taken into account, such as who can request a country mission. Country engagements may include country missions by expert mechanism members at the request of states and/or indigenous peoples. The approval and cooperation of all parties should be sought. If the proposed country mission is triggered by a request from indigenous peoples, the expert mechanism should duly inform the member state concerned to make sure that the government agrees to the proposed visit. Okay, next slide, please. Here are some of the activities of MREP. The next session is going to be the 16th session in July 2023. And then MREP seminars pursuant to Human Rights Council Resolution 3325. The expert mechanism, or MREP, at its 14th session held in July 2020 to prepare a study on treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements between indigenous peoples and states, including peace accords and reconciliation initiatives and their constitutional recognition. Also, there is the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, and this is matter for development, peace building, and reconciliation, because languages play a crucial role in the daily lives of Indigenous people, not only as a tool for education and communication and social integration and development, but as a repository for each person's unique identity, cultural history, traditions, and memory. But despite their immense value, languages around the world continue to disappear at an alarming rate. So with this in mind, the UN Declaration on International Decade of the Indigenous Languages, in order to raise awareness of them, not only to benefit the people who speak these languages, but also for others to appreciate the important contribution they make to our world's rich cultural diversity. Okay, next slide. So these are some of the statements from the expert mechanism advice under the country engagement mandate. So you'll see a list there. As I mentioned earlier, the statement on International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples, the statement on the outcome of MREP's virtual pre-session, proposals from MREP to the Human Rights Council, and so on. And these are all listed on the MREP website. So next slide, please. So I want to talk about your preparation for MREP. You have been able to secure travel and funding to come to Geneva to participate in the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous people. First, the first thing you would need to do is check the agenda. So here's an example of an agenda from MRIP 2 years ago. You'll see that the study listed on the provisional agenda is study and advice on the rights of the Indigenous child under the UN DRIP. So the first thing you would need to do is review that study on the MRIP website. It's listed there. And this is the same thing you would do this year. You'd look it up on the website, see what study they are considering this year, make sure to review it. And then after you review, and you might see potential areas to contribute more information or to correct information, that is how you begin to draft your statement. And always check with your elders for review. This ensures accountability for your statement. So to me, that means my organization, I make sure that they know I'm reviewing this study, and I also show them my recommendations and get my organization's approval before delivering the intervention at MRIP. So please also remember that MRIP is a very organized meeting. There is a strict limit on how long you will be able to make your or deliver your intervention at the meeting. You will have precisely 3 minutes or less to read your statement. In some cases, they'll cut the time down to 2 minutes, depending on time. So at this point, you have to accept that you may not be able to read all the information you provide, but I assure you, this is okay. Just remember your major points in case the time is cut shorter than 3 minutes. So you will submit your original written document or statement to the Secretariat, and the experts will still receive your information in entirety, even if you don't get to make the entire statement during the meeting. So next, after you have written your statement, you must practice, practice, practice. Once you learn the amount of time you will have to read your statement, you must practice according to that amount of time, because the experts will cut your microphone if you continue speaking past your allotted time. Also, remember to take your time and speak slowly, because there are translators who need to understand and translate your words. If you read too fast, no one will understand you, and the translators will not be able to keep up. Okay, next slide, please. So this is an example of my statement or my intervention that I provided when I was an Indigenous Fellow in 2017. So you can see there, it is located on my organization's letterhead, and it has contact information at the very top for my organization, which is the Continental Network of Indigenous Women's of the Americas, or ECMIA. And I belong to the North American region. Next, you'll see there is the title, Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, MRIP. At that time, it was the 10th session, July 2017, at the United Nations, Geneva, Switzerland. So I did review the study, and so it cites the item that I'm going to be making an intervention. So that was item A8. And this is taken directly from the study. It says intersessional activities and follow-up to thematic studies and advice on the rights to cultural heritage and health. And so it says, you know, it shows you my every word that I'm going to make as I deliver my intervention. So that includes my short introduction, what I am going to address, which study, and then noting the paragraph. And then at the time I made one recommendation. So you can see this intervention is 2 pages long, but I have to say that there was just no way, it was impossible to read this entire 2 pages in 3 minutes. So I really had to know my point and be able to deliver it without looking at my piece of paper. It's really important to try to make eye contact with the experts and also deliver your statement in a passionate way. So I'm not saying overly emotional, I'm saying being passionate, making sure that they understand the points that I'm trying to make and why it's so important to me and the Indigenous people that I represent. Okay, next is the last slide. So I just want to say a heya or thank you. And I want to remind you that you truly are the expert of your experience in your Indigenous identity, community, and needs. You have a valuable voice at the UN on behalf of your people. So I just want to encourage you, when you have the opportunity, please take it and know that you belong there and that you are an expert. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. I turn the time back over to Winnie.
Thank you so much, Chandi, for that very informative session and for also sharing your experience at the MRIP and being a fellow and being also an alumni of the Global Leadership School. So thank you for that. So dear sisters, if there's anyone, do you have a question or comments or anything that you need to be clarified by Chandi on the session that she has just delivered? You can put your hand up or you can write on the chat as well, and we'll be able to see it. So are there any questions? All right, Doris, please go ahead.
Hi, Sister Janti. I would just like to ask, if you have that lengthy statement, how were you able to say it all in 3 minutes? What were the highlighted parts that you mentioned in your statement, in the actual oral statement that you made?
Oh yes, thank you so much for this question. So what I had to do in my mind is really try to narrow it down to the most important points that I wanted the experts to hear from me in the session. And so I made sure to do my introduction and to let them know which part of the report that I was addressing, and made sure to make my recommendation and try to tell a impassioned story about why it was so important to me. So for example, in my statement, I wanted to address the issue of deaths by suicide. And so I shared that personal story of how those kinds of deaths affect my people and they affect me. And as I was speaking, I did become a little bit emotional, but I didn't cry, as I was making this statement. I just really tried to stick to the most important key points. But you have your full statement, the full 2 pages, and you submit that to the secretariat. So every expert will receive the full document, and they also make a commitment to reading the full document. So in addition to me delivering the statement verbally, they also are able to read everything afterwards. So I just kind of relied on knowing that even though I wasn't able to read every single word, the experts were still going to receive all of the information I wanted them to receive. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Doris, for that question. Anyone else has a question or a comment? Maybe as they. Okay, so Anima has her hand up. So Anima, please go ahead.
Hello, Sister Jandi. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. We in the team, we are in the verge of actually coming out with a statement. So we were quite confused. So thank you so much. I think you have clarified a lot of things for us. And, one question that I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned that we have just 3 minutes. However, whatever documents or whatever we have written probably in a lengthy format, that would also be handed over to them, so I was just trying to understand that, do they really go through those long documents, or whatever we were trying to explain, because in 3 minutes, they cannot get the emotions or whatever we have written. So do at the background, do they really go through those documents, was what I wanted to know, if that really happens. So thank you.
Yes, that's a great question too. And I would like to assure you that the experts do read every document that is submitted to the secretariat. So when you go to MRIP, there's everybody's sitting, and then the experts are in the front, and then in the back is where the secretariat is sitting. And they'll tell you how many copies that they make. There's a room outside of the the dialogue room where you can go, and there's an organization called DOSIP, and they provide your ability to make many copies of your statement. So you'll go and submit all those copies to the secretariat so that every single expert has a copy of your statement. The other thing I also want to mention is sometimes there may be such a time constraint that even though you're on the speakers list, there just wasn't any time for you to actually speak. But I also assure you that if you submit that document to the secretariat, the experts will still receive your information, even though you were not able to speak. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regina, I can see your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, Sister Jendi. Thank you so much for your presentations. It's very interesting. But my question is, because you mentioned that MRIP is subsidiary body. So my question is there any challenge because like the Arabs continue being the subsidiary body and not a full body in a United Nations? And then the other is you mentioned that one of your friends who give her expertise on MRIP and cannot be able to go back to her country. And is there any protection from the United Nations for the MRIP so they can be safe whether they cannot go back to their country or when they go back to their country? Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Regina. Can you please repeat the first question about the challenge? Because I wasn't able to hear the full question.
Because my question is there any challenge because the MRIP continues to be a subsidiary body, not a full body. So I mean we still don't have enough voice in those bodies. So what's the challenge? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that MRIP is a very powerful mechanism that Indigenous people have to address, the UN. From my perspective and my experience, there have not been any challenges because MRIP is a subsidiary body. They're still very important, and there have been some very important interventions provided at MRIP that have made an impact on holding the different countries accountable for human rights violations. So, and that's been my experience. There may be other stories out there that I'm not aware of, but as far as I know, there have not been any challenges. And then, yes, the Secretariat, on the second question, the Secretariat is very, very deft in being able to assist our Indigenous peoples who receive pushback from their countries. So, for example, as Indigenous people, once you're invited to this this meeting to participate in this mechanism, and if you have an issue, even just traveling from your country to Switzerland, the Secretariat can support with letters. And then, of course, afterwards, I do have another colleague from the Russian Federation who, wasn't able to return back to her country because of her participation at MRIP. And so the Secretariat is able to help find resources for these individuals. They're also able to identify different funding sources for individuals to have that financial support while they're facing some of these things. They're also able to help them seek asylum or being able to stay in another country and be able, for example, my colleague in Nexa was able to stay in Geneva, and her children were also able to come and live with her in Geneva while she has been exiled from her country. So, unfortunately, for some countries, they do not like the interventions of Indigenous peoples. But I would say that when those things happen, it's because the message that you are bringing as an Indigenous person is so powerful. It is so important that you know, if a country refuses to allow you to come back in, then everything you said must be true, and it is probably worse. And so it shows the UN truly, you know, the situation in the member states, and these are also examples that can be provided to the Universal Periodic Review, or UPR, and ultimately can be used to help to hold member states accountable for violations. So I also don't want to scare you. I don't want people to think that this is just naturally what's going to happen. I don't think that it happens to everyone, but I was just wanting to share that this is how powerful our voices are at these mechanisms. When we go and share our experiences as Indigenous people, it is so powerful. So I hope that answers your question. Please let me know if you have any additional questions.
No, thank you. That's answered my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And maybe just perhaps to add onto that is during the MRIP, the Human Rights Council happens just before the MRIP. And so there's so many states that are already in Geneva. And if you notice, if you have an opportunity to attend both the Permanent Forum and the MRIP, you'll notice the difference in the number of states that are there during the MRIP and that are there during the Permanent Forum. And so because the MRIP will give its advice or the reports directly to the Human Rights Council, then I think many governments usually want to sit in and hear what Indigenous peoples from their countries are going to say. And maybe that also contributes to why some people, not everyone, just as Jandy has said, some people are not able to go back home because their countries are there and they're listening. So I think that's one difference I noticed between the Permanent Forum and the MRIP, the number of member states that are sitting in the meetings and are listening and who will approach you to have a discussion with you. Some of them are very friendly, some of them not very friendly. So that's why I think all the experts have told you, when you're doing a statement, you have to be as diplomatic as possible so that you don't get yourself into a situation. And it doesn't always work out like that, just as we've had some examples where you've been as diplomatic as possible. You're just saying the truth about what's happening in your own community, in your own country, but still, you will say your statement, and then a day later or the next day, there's a letter that has been written from your government saying you're not allowed to go back home and something like that. So sometimes this happens. It's not the norm. So please don't hear that someone didn't go back home and then say, okay, I'm never going to go for MRIP. Please go to the MRIP because it's a very, 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 very important space to be in. And many times, especially if you go to the MRIP via the voluntary fund, you're able to actually attend the session on the Human Rights Council, and you're able to see how that happens. And this gives you also an opportunity to interact with your government in that space, because when you are back home, you won't be able to meet any of your government representatives in the same way that you're able to interact with them during the Human Rights Council. So it's a very critical space for me, according to me, for Indigenous peoples. And it's also space for us to also seek allies. So you can speak to other governments who will be who are allies to Indigenous peoples, who also allies to your own community, and you ask them to advocate on your behalf. So they're able to actually, because the truth is, countries can call out each other without any repercussions. There's no one is going to say, well, Sweden was taken to jail by Sudan because they said something about Sudan.
that's never going to happen. So it's also an avenue for us to get other states who are allies to advocate for our rights. So it's, again, a very important platform for Indigenous peoples to participate in. Yeah. So is there any other question or comment? We still have a few minutes before we can close. Well, in case someone is writing a question or a comment, Jandy, I wanted to ask perhaps what your experience was being a fellow, and then also being in the global school, and how that equipped you to be able to participate in, in this platform like the MRIP, the learnings that you had during the global school, and also as an Indigenous fellow.
Yes, thanks, Winnie. That's a great question. I really enjoyed both opportunities. I know it was a ton of information. It was so much information. And it was so much to the point where I wondered, am I really going to remember all of this information? But the interesting thing is that when people ask questions, I was able to remember things. I was able to understand the mechanisms and how we can access them as Indigenous peoples. So so that's been a really pleasant surprise, because like I said, sometimes I wondered, how am I going to remember all this information? I remember actually, I received word that I was accepted as an Indigenous fellow just 2 days before I gave birth to my daughter. And I wasn't sure how I was going to leave her at home and go to Switzerland for a month to complete the fellowship. But thankfully, I was able to figure out a way to take her with me. And once I got to the UN, everybody really loved my daughter, my little baby. And at some points, people would come up and say to me, "Oh, are you the mother of Tani? We met Tani yesterday." So, and sometimes people knew my child more than they knew me. So that was kind of funny. But I think it was important because my children are the reasons why I went to the United Nations. They're the reason why I do the work that I do as a human rights defender. So, so we were able to meet with a lot of different people through the fellowship. We also, like I said, got to learn about all the different mechanisms. And through that experience, I was also able to attend the Human Rights Council meeting the following year. And I was able to contribute to a report by the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty. So, for example, sometimes we think that the only way to get our information out there is to go through anything that says Indigenous people through the UN, such as the Special Rapporteur on Indigenous People. But you are actually able to speak to any special rapporteur. In this case, we spoke to the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, and we were able to go to the Human Rights Council when the Special Rapporteur was providing that report. And then we also organized a side event during the Human Rights Council to talk more about our topics. So that's the other thing I want to share, is it's not just about delivering your statement in 3 minutes at MRIP. You can also organize a side event where You can provide all the information. You can bring other experts in. You can do a Zoom presentation where people from other, people can attend from all different parts of the world, in addition to the people who are in person at MREP. And you can talk fully about your topic. And sometimes the experts come and attend those side events. So in the following year, after I did my fellowship, we did a side event, and two of the experts came to attend our side event, and they received all the information, including, all the research that we had done to gain all the information that we shared. So there are different ways that you can share. And the same thing also when I was a scholar, a FEME scholar, and attended Permanent Forum. We also had side events during Permanent Forum, and were able to share more information and have really rich dialogues with the people that came to participate, and just share more, videos and pictures and research, and we're able to build a bigger network because, sometimes we're sharing brand new information, sometimes we're contributing to a body of knowledge that's already in existence. So so that was great. And then let's see, when I was a scholar, that was one of my favorite memories, because I was able to make lifelong sisterhood, friendships with my FEME sisters from around the world. And when we return for these meetings, sometimes we see each other, sometimes we collaborate, and we'll do the side events or support one another in our side events. And then in some cases, I was also invited to speak at my sister's organizations or schools. So I was able to share more about my culture and my experience with Indigenous women from a different part of the world. So I really loved both experiences. If there was a way to do it all over again, I absolutely would. And I really appreciate, the opportunity to share with our new FEME sisters, because I know how valuable that experience is. And, I want to be able to share anything that I have learned to help other people, other sisters, to be more, plugged into the networks around the UN. So I hope that answers your question, but yeah, both experiences were just, very beautiful, important events in my life.
Thank you so much, Tandy, for sharing your experience. I think it's always wonderful to hear what other Indigenous women are doing with their knowledge, and how that knowledge or that experience has helped or propelled their work, or assisted them in doing their advocacy for their own communities, advocacy at a global level, at the national, or even in your own communities, the kind of work that you're doing. So we're always asking people who were part of the Global Leadership School to let us know what their experience was post the global school, so that our sisters can also be encouraged, that because we know, especially about the information overload, it's something that they have also expressed. So so be encouraged, everyone. It's a wonderful experience that you'll use for years and years and years to come. So thank you so much, Chandi. And for the sisters, if you have any other questions that you want to ask Chandi, you can write to us and we'll forward them
to her, and then she'll be able to answer those questions, and we'll get back to you with whatever response she gives us. So thank you again, Jandi, for your time. Thank you for always accepting our call to come and speak to whichever cohort that is next. And so we want to present this very very beautiful certificate to you. So the International Indigenous Women's Forum, the Indigenous Women's Global Leadership School, in recognition to Jandi Craig for participation and contribution to the capacity building of Indigenous women leaders from Africa, Asia, Latin America, North America, and the Pacific during the 10th edition of the Program on Human Rights and International Advocacy Skills. With gratitude on this virtual modality, and it's signed by Teresa Zapata. So thank you so much, Jandi. I wish you the best, and we look forward to perhaps meeting you in person in one of these events. If any of the sisters are lucky to go to the events, please approach Jandi, introduce yourself, say you're from the 10th edition, and we hope that we'll be able to all meet in person at one point or another. So thank you so much, Jandi, for being here with us and for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us on the MRIP, but also on your experience in the UN system.
Thank you so much. It's very, I'm very honored, and I appreciate you, I appreciate Femi, and I look forward to continuing this work together as sisters, Indigenous sisters. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, sisters, again for coming for the session today. Our next session will be on Friday with the Columbia University. So please remember that. Continue to check your calendar so that you're able to know what the timings are. And I wish you a good day for those who are having, who are doing your morning, a good evening and a good night to those who it's later on in the day for them. And I look forward to seeing you all again on Friday. So take care, stay safe, and yeah, see you soon. Bye, everyone.